Hey guys, this week on Breakaway from Reality is Valentine's Day week, so I thought I'd change my video a little bit. Instead of telling you lovey-dovey stuff, I would tell you a little story, so I hope you will like.
I'm writing this to tell you how I really feel. You probably didn't notice, but for the longest time, I have always been near for you. I wanted you to know what I've done, and I hope by me opening up to you like this, you'll hopefully feel the same way for me, and we can be together forever. I remember when we were both 13 and you first transferred to my school. As soon as you walked in, I thought you were the most beautiful girl in the world. When your tranquil blue eyes crossed mine, even though it was for a brief moment as you scanned across the strange faces in our class, I knew I wanted to be with you forever. But I was heartbroken straight away when you were paired off with some other guy to show you around school. You didn't really notice me much. You were always with your group of friends who were so different to mine. Who am I kidding? I never really had any friends. The one thing that got me through all those lonely years was watching you, admiring everything you did. The way you gracefully went through your day without fault simply left me in awe, day in and day out. As the years went by, you seemed pretty popular with both guys and girls. You were sought after by the popular guys in the whole school, even the older ones, but you shrugged them off. The girls loved how you looked after yourself. You always had your makeup and hair perfect, which made you admired, but hated. It's sad, but it's human nature to get jealous, and we are all guilty of this crime. What they ended up doing, however, was far out of line. I saw how they pushed you when the teachers weren't looking, how they would shove you into the nearest hard object, which, more often than not, was the wall. When you stumbled and slammed into the wall, the teacher would simply turn and say, "Watch where you're going, dear," then go about their business, blissfully unaware of what just happened. Witnessing this happen every other day burnt me up inside. Seeing you have this torment for being better than them, it was painful to watch every time it happened. I hoped it would die down, but it got worse. I saw when the bullies would knock your drink over when you least expected it, just because the most popular guy in school asked you out. I was there when they set your bag on fire in the woodwork class because they thought you were contradicting them when you tried to help them with their work. And I caught a glimpse of the one time they actually threw you to the ground outside the school gate and kicked you until you cried simply because you tried to tell the teachers what they were doing. After that incident, they followed you home. Usually they wouldn't do anything but yell abuse at you. The worst part was, you'd never know when they would suddenly snap and attack you, or walk in inches away from your back. It tore me apart to see the girl I loved so much feel so vulnerable. I wanted to fix it. What I knew, there were three main bullies that were consistent. I knew more, but they seemed to do it out of peer pressure. The main culprit was that narcissistic whore Bethany. Bethany was simply jealous of everything about you. All those things I mentioned that made you great burned her up inside. She used to be the center of attention, and oh my god, did she love it. All those guys wanted to be with her. All those girls wanted to be her. The one difference, She abused the attention for personal gain. She slept with most of the guys who would shower her in gifts or had their mummy and daddy to pay for everything. She only hung out with girls who she deemed lower than her so it wouldn't threaten her god complex. But slowly over the years of you being in the school, she eventually lost her reputation. By then, all the attention was on you. The second who had a grudge against you was that arsehole Chris. He asked you to the school's annual dance in front of both his friends and yours, and you simply rejected him, like many others. But what made this incident different was he ran off crying because he was publicly embarrassed. In school, that meant a lot. He denied liking you and lost all his friends and reputation. So he took his frustration out on who he thought caused it. You. The last person was Julie. She had it in bad for you, since the guy she always liked talked about how amazing you were, whilst not paying any attention to her. Even after she performed some, well, let's say, desperate deeds for him. During the last week of school, I knew they had something special planned for you, so I took it in my own hands to deal with it, because I love you. I didn't want your last few days at school to be ruined. The first person I convinced not to mess with you anymore was Chris. Now, he was much stronger than me, being into all the school sports. Plus, the steroids meant that I wouldn't be able to take him in a simple one-on-one fight. But in the end, that would be his downfall. I knew he kept his steroids in his locker. It wasn't hard to figure out, since our school's security and reputation was so low. There was no need to hide it. I got his locker combination by simply saying I forgot mine to a teacher, and she gave me a list of everyone's combination. Yeah, that's right. They have no sense of security in that school. I cracked open his locker with ease, leaving no trace it was even opened. I found the next shot he was going to use and squeezed out a little bit, then pulled it back to the same spot, leaving a considerable size air bubble. I figured Chris is no doctor, nor he has any clue of how everything works altogether. He just injects himself and trains at the school's gym. I bought a pass for the gym and pretended to train. He eventually came into the gym laughing hysterically with his new friends. Enjoy it when you can. It's not going to last long, I said to myself. The thought creeped up inside my head. He went to his locker, and not long after that, he came out, dressed in his training attire, with a determined look on his face. He was ready to start. He was fine for a while, but eventually slowed down. He had a puzzled look on his face as his body slowly gave up, and eventually the cardiac arrest settled in, and he was on the floor. People tried CPR, but there was no defibrillator around. Since this was a school full of teenagers, who would expect a heart attack in a place like this? I smiled and walked out before the paramedics arrived. It was already too late for him. I worked my way up the list. Julie, was next. She was always jealous of how every guy liked you. I simply slipped through her window without her noticing. I knew her parents were out, so if she made any noise, no one would come to her immediate aid. I pounced on her while she was sleeping, pinning her down. I tied her hands to the bedpost and then her legs. I pulled out several jars from my bag, each almost black. Upon closer inspection, you would see small movements. They were full of all the crawlies that you would typically find in the bottom of anyone's garden. I took my time filling these up with every insect I could find. I wanted her to understand all the pain you must have felt each time they shouted abuse at you, making you feel lower than what you really are. I propped her mouth open with one of those plastic rings a dentist would use for a long procedure, and slowly poured each jar down her throat. Each time her screams was muffled a little more by the buzzing and scratching noise the bugs made as they adjusted to their new home. Tears streamed down her face as I repeated how this was all for you. A few jars in, I could feel the bugs in her stomach, which I was sat on this whole time. By this time, she had pretty much passed out from the pain. When this happened, I'd wait, pour water on her face, and slap her until she responded. For punishment, I'd take out the ring from her mouth and pour water down her throat, making her swallow all those insects and causing them to go into a frenzy of panic. Eventually, during the fifth jar, the pain of all those insects burrowing in her intestines, plus the internal bleeding, caused her to pass away. But not peacefully, of course. I saved the worst until last. I had something special planned for Bethany. She was by far the worst to you. She made your life a living hell. And this was unacceptable. No one as perfect as you should ever have the displeasure of knowing these people. So I carefully set all the pieces and waited. One day I got a head start. I skipped the last class, but no one noticed, not even the teacher. This shows how much I was noticed in school. By this time, I had memorized her route home and waited in an archway. I knew she would pass this area each time. I waited and thought about what I was going to do, and it was all for you. Although I didn't think so much because I already had it all planned out. When I caught sight of her, I grabbed her and pulled her to the ground. She was kicking and screaming, but at this point in her journey, no one was around. The archway led to an abandoned derelict church, which I dragged her away from the path to the building. So there was no witnesses. No one could find her body anytime soon. I did my routine of securing her arms and legs to a post so that I knew there wouldn't be much struggling. After that, I gagged her, for I knew she would make a lot of noise from what I was about to do. I slowly pull out a knife, making sure she caught sight of the shining glimmer that came off it. I placed the point of the blade to her lower leg and smiled as she reacted to the sharp point on her leg. I slowly pushed down and made sure the wound was clean, and it slowly slipped into her flesh. It took a while, but eventually the handle of the knife was touching her skin. I took my time pulling it out, making sure the wound did not rupture with the crimson liquid. That would have meant her death, and that was too easy. As soon as the tip of the knife exited her body, I immediately split up a bandage and applied enough pressure to the cut to slow the bleeding to a minimum. Then I placed the knife a little higher on her leg, doing the same thing. I stared into her eyes as she helplessly watched me do it over and over, all over her body. Every stab, I would say a remark about how you didn't deserve what she did to you. Eventually, her body was nothing but red bandages. She was barely conscious as I slipped the final blow into her heart. I can imagine you're screaming about now. In fact, I know you'll be, and I'll be close enough to hear it. And by you stopping, I know you've gotten this far into the letter, so I'll make my way in. It's pretty easy to get into your house after a few times. You probably thought it was your parents who left this note in your room in the first place. No, it was me. Don't be afraid of the noise downstairs. It's only me. Put down the phone. I know by now you probably have it in your hand, but I cut the phone lines. Don't bother calling your parents if you haven't already. I've already silenced them. You can't stop screaming now. I'm always outside your door. Unlock it now. And so, it'll be you and me, together, forever. Lots of love. Your secret admirer.